I can deal with it as long as you're not hearing it.
Hello, everybody. Coffee with the Docs. I'm Dr. Laura Foster, Soul Inspired Girl, and we are here for episode 3. I couldn't be more excited. I say that every time. I guess I could be more excited. But I have Dr. I think you've seen me more excited before. So this is part 3 of our limited series. We're doing starting the year with both feet planted. I love that topic, Heather.
Thanks. We struggled with the title, and then all of a sudden I'm like, grounding. You've got this new program, Roots, coming up. I'm like, let's start the year with both feet grounded, right? And like I just am planted, I love the idea of that.
And I'm sorry if this is a little bit disturbing. We are at the same time on Instagram TV, as well as being on Facebook Live. But I'm here to say that today we're talking about finding your inner truth and your inner voice. And this is, as Dr. Heather would say, this is a topic that's really near and dear to me, mostly because I have done programs on, finding your inner voice, reclaiming your voice, connecting with your truth. But this is not just specific to me. I know this is a really big topic for you and really anybody who's looking to kind of curate and live their best life. I think this is so incredibly important. Heather, talk to me. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's funny. Isn't this hilarious? I'm holding up my IGTV. I'm going to need to get a tripod if we're doing this ongoing. I loved this subject because I think I ignored this for a lot of decades of my life. And I muscled ahead with my brain and didn't give my heart a lot of space. And so over the last few years and over the last many walls I ran into with my face, figuratively, in business and life, I've learned, and in part through your teachings, to tap in a little more into my heart, into inner leadings, to provide space to listen. And so I think this is a great topic. And as I said last week, I just like to sit and listen to you talk about it, because you've worked on this for a while. You train it, you coach it, and it's a heart subject for you, no pun intended. And so I love listening to you. So I want to ask you, how do you define, some people are like, inner voice? What are you talking about? So how do you define that?
Sidebar.
Yes.
If you can turn down if you're able to turn down, I'm getting.
Yeah, I don't know how to.
And if not, don't worry, we'll manage. Okay. So what does it mean to me to find your inner voice? Here's how I would say this. It really it can mean a lot of things, but to me, it means to connect with your inner guidance, your intuition, your, inner GPS, whatever words you want to use. And one of the things that I often say to my coaching clients is it's not often the loudest voice that's in your head, right? I mean, it could be, especially when you've really passed 44 yield signs and be careful and watch out, danger ahead. But I just really mean it's quite often it's that little voice, the voice that's just letting you know, it's the inklings, it's the thing that bubbles up around you. So to find your inner voice, I mean, there's nowhere to look but within you, but for whatever reason, in the busyness and the craziness of today's life, it becomes harder and harder and harder. And sidebar, because we started this originally, Coffee with the Docs, last spring as kind of a way to connect at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, really, I think 2020 was a lot about hearing your inner voice. Whether you wanted to hear it or not, it really just felt like this was something that was coming up for people. And if you... Clarity was one of the things that came forward, because of course your inner voice is the thing that connects you with your truth, who you are, why you're here. It's the thing that tells you what to move towards. It's the thing that tells you don't go there. This is for you. This isn't. Are you being true to yourself? I mean, all the best stuff happens down there. So I think that's what it means to me. Now, you and I both know, we're both chiropractors. For those who don't know this about us, we're both, I'm retired. You're not so much retired, but you do it on a very part-time basis. But you and I both know this chiropractic legend. Her name's Dr. Jeannie Ohm. And you have shared a story with me about tuning in to your inner voice. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Uh, uh, Jeannie Ohm was a legend and died fairly recently. And one of my greatest memories of her was watching her speak and talk about, are we getting too much feedback? Do you want me to log off this?
It's all good.
You're okay? Is everybody okay with all the feedback we're getting? Hey, Instagram, if just in case we get too much feedback and we switch, we are over on Dr. Laura's Facebook page. So join us over there if I just suddenly go, I've had enough, and I shut it off. Okay, so Jeannie Ohm used to talk about how when her kids were young and they could not process through their emotions, or they just didn't really know how to identify or articulate them, she helped them with a visual. And she said, okay, they have this family cat. And when you pet a cat, the fur going one way, that feels right. That feels good. It's nice. When you rub a cat backwards, they don't like it. You don't like it. It doesn't feel good in your heart. And she used to have her kids use that when they were in an emotional situation. She said, what way is your cat fur going? What does that feel like? And they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's my cat fur going the right way. And that is my cat fur going the wrong way in certain situations. And it reminds me of a presentation you gave a couple years ago for the League of Chiropractic Women, when you talked about the more in tune with your inner voice you got, the more quickly you knew if it was a yes or a no.
Yeah.
When faced with a decision, when faced with being asked to do something, when faced with a commitment, the more you honored and got in tune with that, the less you disappointed people, including yourself. And you saved yourself a ton of time and heartache and resentment, because when you tuned into it and went, I know it's a no, even though my head wants to say yes, and maybe I should, or I feel obligated to, or it's the right thing, I think, your heart was like, no. And so I really love that. You taught me a lot with that. And I will still to this day, like if I'm faced with something, I'm just not sure. I'm like, what way's my cat fur going? And usually I can tell. So if that helps anybody.
I love that. I actually never heard Jeannie talk about that story. But
really?
No, I haven't. And I have to say that's true. I mean, we are kind of apt at times to go against our own inner judgment. And oftentimes when we feel like we've made a wrong turn, what will we say? We'll say, I knew it wasn't the right thing for me, or something to that effect. So, for me, it's like, it's the recognition that you have that information inside of you, and the way that you access it is, let me just tell you, well, first of all, let me ask you this. If you don't connect with your inner voice, what do you think is the reason why? Like, what do you think separates you or your clients from their inner voice? And I'll also share on that level, but what do you think? What do you think are the things? Like, obviously, if you're not tuning into yourself, you're not going to hear your inner voice, but what other things kind of come up?
I think, so are you asking what do I do to hear it? Like,
what do you do to hear it?
If I'm not.
And what do you think silences the inner voice? Okay, forget it.
Okay.
No. You're good?
Yeah. No, I'm good. Okay. No, I love it. I'm just thinking, because there's a couple different ways I want to go with this question. I'm also wondering what anybody who's listening, please feel free to pop into the comment section and answer any of these questions that we're throwing back and forth, because we do want this to be a discussion. So here's what I'm going to say to that. When I have loose boundaries, often I don't listen well, because I'm too worried about what other people are thinking, what I should be doing. And when I'm just not clear on what I want and what my values are. You referred last time to when we talked about confidence and we talked about self-compassion, that knowing what you want and what you stand for is essential as a foundational pillar for those, and for hearing your inner voice. If you don't know what you want, it is your inner voice can be a little bit scattered sometimes, or at least your perception of it. So that's number one. I have been guilty of wearing busyness as a badge of honor. And when in the busyness, it's very easy to drown out what's being said. You and I are, you are bringing me in for a presentation on Thursday morning to a group you belong to. One of the things we're going to talk about is diving to the bottom of the pool, because the top of the pool is, I talk about kind of like that last Saturday in August outdoor public pool, the noise and the pressure on the surface of that pool, all the kids screaming and the lifeguard and all that stuff. But diving down where it's quieter and you have stillness allows that to come up. So that's, I would say that. And I think just a big one, it can't go enough without saying, is worrying about what other people think. And so a lot of times that inner voice comes up. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't do that because they'll think this. But you and I both had that with our chiropractic careers. Both of us had feedback as we were exiting. Well, you invested all this money and you went to school for 8 years and you've been in practice 25 years and you're really good at it. And if all of that was allowed to sink in, that would be hard to act on where you're being led. Can you tell me?
I love that. Yeah. And I love that. And also just to say, I don't think that we ever stop caring about what other people think of us. I don't think that we ever get beyond that, right? And you made a really good point there is, I love that, by the way. You're just the queen of metaphors. Going underneath so that you can under the water. I just explain it. I never have a story around it that's a metaphor, but yeah, going underwater, you know what that's like. It's like this sense of calm and you can actually hear what's being said. That's what I always loved about hosting retreats, right? In the busyness of your day to day, especially when you're not used to checking in, right?
Yeah.
In the busyness of your day to day, the noise of what goes on around you distracts you from the messages that you need to hear. And so when you cultivate, create, curate those opportunities to go under the water, I think that's such a great metaphor. That's when you're going to hear it. And busyness is a great distractor. Man, I did Ironman for multiple years because I was trying to distract myself from the things that I wasn't listening to myself. And I think it's really strong. I think it's really important to create that strong connection inwards, because if you don't, you run the risk of really living your life or curating a life that is based on somebody else's playbook, right? That's I did that. And I kind of
curating a life based on somebody else's playbook. Can I get an amen out there? Because that was beautiful. I was already ready to kind of recap some of the things you just said, but that just nixed them all. That was awesome. Because it's true.
Hold on. Everybody needs to do presentations with somebody who's like that, who's just like such a big cheerleader. So yes, everyone needs to do Facebook Lives with Heather Denniston, because she's always like, yes, so good.
I love, I can't get through Coffee with the Docs without mentioning Brene Brown. And she is so good at, on her podcast, she'll go, stop right there. And then she'll repeat what they said. And man, that's amazing. And I feel like that every fourth sentence that you say. So
that's hilarious.
That's really awesome.
And I also think that around that, like it's even this thing where, we can both, we are pretty much the same age. We can both be the same age. We can, both have kids. You can both be married. You can both be chiropractors. You can both love yoga. You can have a ton of likes, but you're not me and I'm not you. Yeah. And so it's great to ask other people around you, trusted sources, but don't do it at the expense of you being your best trusted source, right? Yeah. That's kind of what happens is like, we have a tendency to kind of go outside ourselves because as women, especially, we love to talk things out. But just make sure you know where the buck stops. Just make sure you know that the person you're speaking to, like I'll come to Heather because she can hold the vision for me, right? So it's important that you have those conversations with the people that can show up in that vein, that vibration. But at the end of the day, it ultimately doesn't matter what Heather thinks if it doesn't align with me. So it's that making sure you close the loop and you come back to your inner connection. I think that's key. I think that's so the part we miss sometimes. Key. Yep.
We do. I remember just an illustrative story. When I had a rocky romantic life when I was younger, and I really didn't get super serious about somebody until I met Brent. And I remember a girlfriend of mine was early in Brent and my relationship, and she was a triathlete and she was very athletic, and she knew I was as well. Not like she was, but I liked to work out and I liked to do these things. And she said to me one night at dinner, she goes, so does he work out tons and is he super sporty? And I'm like, no. And she's like, oh, well, is that going to work for you? And I carried that with me for like a couple of weeks where I was like, maybe this isn't going to work. And then I went, I actually don't care. I actually like to work out alone. That's not a need I have in a partner, but I allowed, because I wasn't clear and I hadn't really fully listened to what it was that I wanted and needed in a partner. I allowed that to kind of wash over me and go, oh, but wait, maybe it's not right. Oh, I should break up with him, blah, 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 blah. And so kind of a funny experience, but I think like you're saying, as women, a lot of times we'll allow, if we're not clear, we will allow other things to impress us more than it maybe should.
And I guess like, it's okay to contemplate those things. Like someone asks something. I am a big question asker. So great when someone else asks a question. And by the way, that is one of your strengths, is to ask really great questions. And then that sort of flooded for me. I thought, asking other people great questions is great, but asking yourself really big questions is good too. So like, I feel like sometimes we fail to ask the questions that lead to our answers because we've already told ourselves we don't know the answer. So I'm like, if you don't ask, you won't find out. And when you ask a question, you open the portal to your own answers. And the biggest thing after you ask the question is to create some space, right? Like to create some space to allow your truth and your voice to have a place. Like if you just kind of be like, well, I don't know, right? We do that all the time, don't we? I don't know. And I've done this thing in talks before where, if you ask them, I'm like, hey, Heather, and you don't need to answer this, but hey, Heather, if you could do anything in this life, like you could like take all the walls back and you could do whatever you want as work in this world, what would you do? The first thing almost always the person says is, I don't know. And then what do? They proceed to tell you exactly what they know, which is all the things they do. And then they end it with, in a perfect world, or if I could, or whatever, right? Like, it's like, start with this statement of like, I don't know who I am and what I need. And we end with it, but then we tell ourselves the truth in the middle. And I'm like, how about we just stop that? How about we just push back the ends and we just say the middle part? What you could say is, I don't know how to connect with that, or I'm finding that difficult to connect to my inner voice. But if you just even stop telling yourself you don't know, just that. Okay. Today, number one.
I like that.
Remember we talked about Post-it notes last time? It'd be like,
for self-compassion.
You don't know. Yes.
Yeah.
Susan.
Stop telling yourself you don't know.
Yeah.
Susan Scott, who wrote Fierce Conversations, a great book. It's a great book, even just for inner reflection, but it's funny. Brent, I wanted Brent to read it. He never read it, but a coworker suggested it. So of course he dove right in, read the whole thing. And so we have a couple of things that we pull from that. And one of them is that when I don't know comes out of your mouth, the person in front of you says, but if you did know, what would it be? And always you can come up with something. So when you're dealing with, well, I don't know what my inner voice would say. I don't know. Well, if you did know, what would it be? Journal it, just guess, because often that's right.
It's so true.
So I think that's really key. Question for you, Laura.
Yes.
We're talking about this inner voice situation, inner leading. And for those of you who are people of faith, that inner leading for you could be God or whoever it is, for you. I'm a Christian, so I rely on kind of what I think God is telling me a lot. Why do you think it's important? Why do you think it's essential for us to be continually, consistently checking in?
Well, I think if we're not conscious about it, anything that's not conscious, of course, is often unconscious. And then that's where we lead astray. Like that's that kind of part where I'm like, at the end of the day, you could be looking around the world at other women that like I'll look to other women in my world who create mentorship for me. That's really what I'm trying to say. So I look to them and there's this desire sometimes to want to emulate them. Not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing, but it has to go through your own screen. And so I think that this is really essential to to go out into the world, allow the world to reflect back on you so that you can see, you can feel what resonates with you. So it's like when other people do it, it becomes an example for you, and you can connect with that. And you know what that feels like inside. You're like, that speaks to me. That sings to me. That makes my heart light up. And so that part is great. But this is the part where I'm saying, you know, it's your life, your lane. You need to make sure that you're really freaking clear on that.
Yeah.
Because you'll start adopting things from other people's lives, and it's okay to do it consciously. It's okay to like, I'm going to try these on. Then you go, yeah, that's not for me. That's how I feel about, you know, the 4 a.m. club. Like, excellent. No, not doing that.
Not for me. Yeah.
No longer. It once was for me, no longer. But that's the risk. So I think at the end of the day, you just need to know where the information comes from. And there's a few things that you need to really connect with, which is you need to trust, right? Like there's this part where there's like, it's not going to come out maybe the way that you think it's going to come out. So there needs to be this level of patience and trust. But if you don't open up this communication and conversation, and this is where what you always say rings true here, curiosity and question asking, those two things will lead you to the information that you're looking for. And, you know, there are lots of other ways to do it. How do you connect in with your inner voice? Like if you were to say like, there's some like practical, and I know you're really great about this. You're always like, we have to leave them with some practical strategies.
This is us leaving you with practical strategies. Dun, da, da, da. By the way, if you were over on Instagram and you suddenly saw it cut off, at Soul Inspired Girl, at Well Fit and Fed, go over to Instagram and hit follow, and then message us what you got out of today, because, you know, we're on the fence. Do we want to keep rolling with these? Do we not? What do we want to do? Yeah. So go over, message what you got out of this, but we won't see those messages unless you hit a quick follow, because it dumps into some crazy bucket that we never see. So do that. And I X'd out because I was losing focus on my good friend here, Laura. So I just shut her down. So if you were over there, I'm very sorry about that. You're welcome here now. And so to answer your question, Laura, a couple of things come to mind in my very scattered squirrel brain. So number one is you just talked about emulation versus like envy or something along those lines. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of power moves we can make in our life can be going by saying, oh, well, they're doing that. I'm going to try that on. Ooh, that does fit for me. This morning routine or this method of business or whatever. I think that's great. But when you want to be that person, I think that's where we cross a line that is tricky, because we're losing ourselves. You are your own unique snowflake, and there's nobody else like you. And what you are put on this earth to do is about what your gifts and talents are. And it's important to find those. The other thing too that alludes to this is kind of, you know me and goal setting, I'm big on it. And I always talk about good versus should goals. So good goal, like an example is a woman, a client of mine. She came to me to lose weight, and that's not typically what I do, but she had a compelling story and we talked about it. And so we started on a journey, and no weight loss. And finally I sat down with her, and this was remiss on my part. I should have done this much earlier on. I said, tell me about this goal to lose weight. Why do you want to do this? And she said, well, because my doctor said I need to lose weight. And I said, so that's why you're doing it? And she said, well, my husband said that it would be. I'm like, let's talk about the goal you actually want to achieve. So we dug down and found her good goal instead of her should goal, which happened to be, I want to hike. Great. Let's start working on a hiking program. And of course, in the end, she ended up with the weight loss situation anyway. But identifying like what your good goals and objectives and intentions for you are versus what you think you should do or what everybody else is doing, I think is really important. And you can only get there if you are listening to what's going on inside there. So to answer your question, journaling 1000% is because sometimes it's all a jumble up in here, and pen to paper can help make sense of it. And even if it's not like perfectly coherent on the page, sometimes just getting it outside of you gives it some perspective. Meditation, which is a very new thing for me, just allowing some quiet in the mind can
How
be
long
very,
do you
very
meditate?
helpful.
I know someone's going to ask that.
10 or 15 minutes.
That's actually quite a long time. I think studies have even shown that 5 minutes of meditation already shows the positive benefit. So
wow, that's good
amazing.
to know. Okay. Yeah, that's great. For those of you who are like, where do I get started? Insight Timer is running a 30-day meditation mindfulness morning challenge right now. That's super simple, and a different cool person every day, which is kind of fun. Get to know different teachers. Okay. So if that's something you could try. Not committing to things I suck at. So this goes back to your listening to your intuition about whether it's a yes or a no. Because sometimes I will find myself, and actually usually what happens is I get super clear and I clear my schedule, and I'm only doing things that are meaningful for my path and who I want to be in the world and who I want to help in the world, and super clear. And then suddenly I'm like, why am I doing, like, the jump rope thing? I love jump rope. You guys know this, and I love it. So I thought,
and sidebar, holy, you are very good at it. You need to go on her.
Thank you.
You need to go on her YouTube. Like that rope and where it goes and how, it's just a sight to see. The most of us are just trying not to pee our pants, and you are up there. Like, you are like, I don't even know what to say, but okay. So yes,
that's hilarious. Okay,
that,
so this is a perfect example of me not listening. Okay. Back in March, I'm like, what can I do to help some folks because their gyms are closed? I'm like, I'm going to start a jump rope Facebook group. Okay. And I'm like, that's great. It'll be just like a little something that I do, whatever. Nothing to do with me. It was right time, right place. It went from 30 members to 3,500 members in about 3 months. And I was spending 5 or 6 hours a week posting, commenting, encouraging, which was great. But when I went back to it, I'm like, this was not supposed to be my job. And so I very luckily found the most amazing person, Bernadette Henry, to hand it off to. But I had to check myself and go, this is a passion and I have, and I wanted to dedicate this much time to helping others do this. But somewhere along the way, it took over my week, and I was not checking in enough to go, oh, hold on. You're committing to something that isn't in line with the other ways you want to be spending your time and other ways you can be helping people. And so I think that happens a lot with commitments. If you look at your schedule and it's completely out of balance, I think it's reflective of not sitting and listening to your inner voice. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. And I think, just to be clear too, I thought that you did a really quick course correction. I mean, you did. You figured that out, tapped in really quick. And it's because you regularly, meditate, you regularly create space for yourself, you regularly journal, you do have this learned habit, right? It's a learned habit. Right?
It doesn't
happen by accident. A learned habit of knowing that your answers are in you. They're not outside of you. And so you have to create the space to hear that. So yes, and yes, and yes. And I think that's all about alignment. And typically we learn these things from getting off course, right? Like we don't learn these things. These are not poignant learning moments from when we're cruising in the right lane. We learn these things and we're like, we're like heading over there. Then you're like, wait a second, what happened here? I think that's such a big thing. And also to speak to this, you have a big event that's coming up on Saturday that I'm going to be a part of as well as an attendee. Tell me about it, because it really speaks to this. Like, it's an annual wellness planning event.
Exactly. It's called the Get Your Act Together. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek. ACT stands for Activate, Crystallize, and Transform. It's a 3-hour event. And what we're talking about. It's providing a period of space to get in and listen, because many of us are discombobulated, stress, a little PTSD, anxious, feeling a little paralyzed about moving forward. And this is going to be a facilitated event to identify some intentions, to have some reflection time about what went on last year, to have some great discussion and community time, to leave with solid intention for this first 90 days, some loose intentions for the rest of the year that we can work on implementing practically, and all sorts of great stuff. We're going to do a time map, but we're going to do some really wonderful stuff. And tomorrow's the last day you can register. So I'm going to put the link in the comments and we'll get it around so that you guys can check it out if you so choose. Come join us. It's going to be great. There's, 50 women coming, and it's going to be amazing. So really looking forward to that.
And I like that, because if when you have somebody else who's facilitating it and hosting it and drawing it through, you actually do this. Like, I think there's a lot of us, and this happens in January and September, the other January, and a few other times in the year, where you actually I want to create more intention about where I'm going with my life, or what I'm doing, or I want to connect in, or I want to make this more forefront in my life. And, with the best of intentions, sometimes don't get there. So, okay. So you'll post that, you'll link it down below. That's amazing. Sure. And let's talk a little bit about Friday, because this is part 4 of our limited series.
It is.
And we are talking about self-care. It's not what you think. Obviously, for obvious reasons, given our history and our background, we have talked about self-care a lot. And if you had asked me 20 years ago what I thought self-care was, the answer will be very radically different, very different than what I would say now. What about you?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I honestly think it's going to be the most compelling coffee with the docs of the 4 that we're doing.
No pressure.
Because no pressure for you, Laura, to show up,
in your best self with your most interesting information. Okay.
I do think it is, because of where we're at right now and the degree of self-care that is required of us at this point of complete fatigue in order to get us moving gently through what's happening, when we all thought this would be done 9 months ago. And so I'm excited about it. I'm going to do some research this week on a few things. I have some ideas. But like you said, even if we just sat and talked about, okay, when we first started at University of Victoria together, what did you do for self-care? I would have said, ran a hot bath. And now,
I would have said,
like you said,
go to the student union building for a beer. That would have been
yes, and nachos. I was going to put in nachos there. I didn't want to confuse anybody, but I could down a plate of nachos or 2 pretty easily back in that day.
That was my self-care.
That was my self-care. So, so join us on Friday at 9 a.m. PST, and we're going to be on the WellFit and Fed page that day. I'm going to figure out how to stream to Instagram, because that was kind of fun, but I was like a bit of a squirrel and not paying attention, so I had to shut her down.
It's tough.
It's all good. It was a good first. I loved that. Right. It was literally 1 minute before we were to go live that we're like, let's do IGTV. So we just throw it on, and you know what? We're not afraid. So hopefully we will have our act together in good way on Friday, and we would love to see you there. Any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, I number 1 is, sometimes when we're doing these, we have a difficult time circling back. So we will come back. We will put some of the links to some of the resources. You talked about the insight timer and the meditation and so on. The book Fierce Conversations, which, by the way, you also told me to buy. I read and I love, and things like that, and also to your event. And then we'll link it up to where we're going to be on Friday for our next and our last coffee with the doc. So thank you so much, everyone, whether you're here in real time or you're here on replay. We so appreciate all of it. All right, Heather, we'll see you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.